White House now calling Russia's latest actions an invasion.
World leaders also condemning Russia ordering troops into eastern Ukraine. Here now with the latest, Ric Epps, Fox 5 political analyst. Rick, good morning.
Good morning, Ron.
So yesterday was something. It was almost an hour-long speech, airing of grievances, if you will, very combative Putin. Let's talk about what's happening today, recognizing those two regions in eastern Ukraine. What does that mean, and is that the invasion that we've been waiting for?
Well, I think it's more the tip of the iceberg, right? The Donbass region, which has the two republics, Donetsk and Luhansk, that are there, have already had traditional ties with the separatists who were living in the region to Russia. And so on one hand, you could argue that the window dressing, if you would, is like, aha, I'm going into this area. What I would suggest is that this is more the tip of the iceberg, because as he slowly starts to make incursions into Ukraine, this is just the first step in what could be a wider range of steps going forward. It's a game of brinkmanship. This is really an interesting point to see how far he's going to go in terms of getting, to see if he gets what he wants.
And he's taking risks with it along the way. Does he understand the consequences of what will happen if he does go through with this?
Sadly enough, I think he is betting on the U.S. and the West response, which historically, if you go back and look at in Austria 1956, the U.S. and Czechoslovakia in 1968, both times we said we would protect two countries. We backed off, and both were taken over by the Soviet Union at that time when they were trying to separate and become democratic states. If we track history, then that would tell him that, I can go a little further because the West is not going to push back. They don't want full-scale war. And as long as I can provide enough disinformation to the region, which he's done, he's threatened now and said that Ukraine is the aggressor, right? Which is not true at all. But he is saying that, which then lets him say, well, we're going to go in and protect our people, and we can take more aggressive action. And that's where the misinformation and disinformation becomes a problem.
And the pretext that we keep hearing so much about, why even bother with the pretext? However, in this day and age of communication and social media, people seem to know what he's up to, and it doesn't seem to be working. So why bother with the pretext and just not go in?
Well, that's the issue. I mean, one thing for him is that, obviously, and I mentioned this the other day, that Putin really wants to reconstitute and take back the regions that he feels are slipping away, that are part of the old Soviet Union and old Russian Republic. And so for him, and he's had trouble with this in Belarus and Moldova and other areas around that he's having trouble holding on to, he's trying to get that old school Russian hardcore stance, which really says, I have to make sure I maintain some of these territories. And the question is going to be is, what are you going to give me to stop it? And this is where the game of what we call coercive diplomacy plays in. How far will he go, and what will the West give him to stop the process? We already know the pipeline, that the agreement that they had set up with Germany is right now on the table. As far as sanctions go, it's a no-go right now. So it could really be a risk factor in terms of economically for Russia if they did continue down this road. It could really be dangerous for them.
That's how they're handling it with the West. But what about the UN? What are they doing?
Well, the UN Security Council is really trying to, firstly, they've condemned, the action. But now the question is, again, for them, is like, how far do we go in terms of trying to impede this? Russia sits on that Gang of Five. You've got China and Russia that are part of that, along with, of course, France and UK and us, right? And so with that, you have to also think about the context of the people who are influencers on that Security Council. Two of them have ties together, Russia and China, that become problematic in terms of, China's already said, we're going to wait and see. We're worried about this, but we're going to wait and see how this plays out. That's very dangerous. The game is very dangerous that they're playing right now.
The potential for bloodshed. He mentioned it yesterday. You talked about this post-Cold War thing, and Putin was a former KGB leader. We know that. He was a prime minister in the late 90s under Yeltsin. He has seen that part of the region post-Soviet Union as a Western-dominated, if you will, right? And he wants to go. Is that even possible? Because yesterday during that speech, he called the leadership in Kiev, he called it a regime. So were there a lot of underlying messages in every single word that was said yesterday?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And how do you kind of translate all those?
Well, for us in the West, obviously, we have to be able to, understanding the cult of personality of the individual. You have to first be able to say, okay, how much of this is politicking, right? And how much of this is really the game of protracted action. And in Putin's case, again, I said because it's incremental. He doesn't want to go too far. I think he understands the consequences of getting into a global conflict. No one wants that because this is about the money, right? Okay. And so recognizing that money runs the world, not conflict, and anything that's going to impede that, they don't want to deal with. So the question is, how far can he go? What gains can he make that's going to give some condemnation, but it's not going to push him to a point where they will lose everything in terms of their economics. They don't want the economic sanctions to be too severe. And this is the question that we have to see, is how far he's going to go. He already controls a chunk of that region. The question is, if he pulls those regions back, the Donbass region, what's going to happen next? Is that going to be the end point, or is he going to go further into Kiev and to the western part of Ukraine? And that's where we have to decide on the West, how far are we willing to go to really stop him?
Will sanctions play a part in this at all?
Oh, yeah, I think the sanctions are definitely, they've already started. And again, the only way you can squeeze Russia is economically. They don't have a lot of resources there. They have gas and oil from down in the Baku fields, but other than that, most of their resources they have to import. So the only way you can hurt them, really hurt them, is economically speaking. The only way to do that, though, is that you have to cut off their sources. And so, China now becomes a linchpin in this, because China creates a problem for us. And to see the relationship warming between Russia and China really sets up a problem for us to be able to squeeze them, if you would, squeeze Putin economically to achieve aims that pushes him back or makes him limit the amount of damage he can do. We already know in the last 8 years from the Crimean War in 2014, 14,000 people were killed over that period of time. He has no problem with sending his troops in. The question, and again, is just how far he's willing to go to make that happen. And I think we'll see over the next few days just how, and also what is the West going to do? What's Biden going to do regarding this to protect the sanctity of that sovereign nation?
Yeah, the critical next few steps. We're going to keep a close eye on that, obviously. Ric Epps, thank you for the analysis. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Good to see you guys.
Thank you. Good to see you.